सर्ववेदार्थतत्त्वज्ञं वेदार्थप्रतिपादकं पुराणसारसर्वज्ञं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् ओम अस्मद्गुरुभ्यो नमः. Welcome to all brothers and sisters. So, we will continue our study of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So, therefore, we have just made an introduction last time into the study of these sutras of Patanjali. Sutra means aphorism. So yoga, as the term yoga as explained by Patanjali, is the process of stopping or suspension of the behavior of mind. Mind means, you can also understand as formed consciousness. So our real existence is our inner light, the I am, the Lord consciousness, and mind is the formed consciousness. So it is on the surface layers. So when the mind makes its existence felt only through its behavior towards other things. Even though mind exists, but without the presence of others, you cannot feel the existence of the mind. So towards itself, it has no behavior. So yoga is stopping the behavior of the mind, but not stopping the existence of mind. It is very subtle. Yogaha chitta vritti nirodhaha. Vritti means behavior. So, it is not any effort to stop the mind, but it is the process of suspension or stoppage of the behavior of the mind. So, mind has two faces. Like we have one face. Every one of us, we have one face, physically. But mind has two faces. So one face is turned towards its real existence, that is the I am. I am is the real existence of us. That is the inner consciousness. So the face turned towards the inner consciousness, that has no behavior. So it has no behavior. Then in which state the mind exists when its face is towards the inner consciousness? The mind exists in the state of yoga only. Because it has no behavior, it will be in its real state of existence. That real state is yoga. The other face of the mind is turned towards the senses and their objects. When the mind is turned towards senses and objects, then it has its behavior. So towards other things and persons, when the face of the mind is turned towards other things and persons, it behaves in terms of impressions due to the presence of others. When there is the presence of a person or an object, then it makes an impression of the object or the person. So then it behaves in terms of the other person or other object. So the totality of this process, that means the presence of others and the reaction of the mind in total is what we call the environment. So environment is not some different object as we call it. What we call environment is our own mind which reacts, which behaves in terms of impressions. And its behavior is in the form of a reaction towards the so-called others, which we understand as others. So this forms the environment. Therefore, it behaves in terms of others. And it behaves in terms of others through the activity of the five senses. So these five senses, they are the sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. These are the five senses. And each of these senses has its own sense organ on the physical plane. So the word yoga means the realization of oneness. So when the mind is turned towards the inner consciousness, then only it is possible to realize the oneness. Because the inner consciousness is what we call the I am is only one. When the mind turns to the other side, towards others, then this oneness is not felt, not realized. That is why there is the behavior of the mind through this activity of these five senses. In fact, the five senses are like the windows. So the mind acts through these five windows towards others. That means the objects are the persons. So the activity of the sense organs, the senses, each sense has its own organ on the physical plane, organ is on the physical plane, but the activity of the organ is on the vital plane. Each sense organ is on the physical plane. We have our eyes, our ears, our nose, and our tongue, and our skin. All these are on the physical plane. These are the organs. But their activity, the activity of these 5 organs is on the vital plane, which is different from the physical plane. And the perception of the senses takes place on the mental plane. You see, there are 3 types of activities on 3 planes. The first one is on the physical plane, where there is the activity of the sense organs. The sense organs are on the physical plane. And using these sense organs, all the 5 senses, they make their activity, which is on the vital plane. And the perception, because what is the, from the activity of the senses, what is that we get is the perception. So the perception takes place on the mental plane. So therefore, we have 3 different instruments. One is the mind, which is on the mental plane. And the other is the action of the senses, that is on the vital plane. And the third one is the apparatus for the senses, that is on the physical plane. So on these 3 planes, these are arranged like this. So continuously the mind keeps its activity through, what is the activity? The activity is perception. This perception is in the form of receiving the impression. So these 3 planes, that means the physical plane, the vital plane and the mental plane, together they form the lower nature of man. So the lower nature of man reacts to the environment in terms of impressions. So the impressions are received on the screen, which is called mind. We have a screen inside, that is our mind. It receives all the impressions like images. The reaction, when it receives the impressions, then it has its reaction. So the reaction is called the behavior towards others. So this reaction is the behavior of the mind. And this is what is called chitta vritti. Vritti is behavior. Chitta vritti, the behavior of the mind. So as long as the process of this behavior is continuing, then we are not in the yogic state. We are out of yoga. We are not in yoga. So therefore, even though we make some yoga practice using our physical body, That is what we always tell others, that we are doing yoga. We say that every day we are practicing yoga for 1 hour or like that. But that is not in real sense. It is because it is some activity on the physical plane. But even during that activity, still the mind is in its own activity in terms of its behavior. So therefore, it is not in the real yogic state. So yoga practice of yoga is not the goal for us. What is the goal of our whole study of the science of yoga? Is not just mere practice of yoga. We have to practice it for what? Ultimately, the practice should culminate in living in yoga. Constantly to live in the yogic state is the goal of practicing yoga. So if you are practicing yoga for the whole life till the end, that means you have not reached the goal. You are still at the means only. Goal is not that. Just for example, when you are hungry, your goal is to have food. But to have your food, you have to follow some process. You have to prepare the food. So preparation of food is not the goal. It is the means. We have to prepare and arrange our food. Then only we can eat the food. So arranging the food is only preparation. It is not the end. It is only the preparation, the meals. But what is the goal is to have the food and get satiated. Similarly, practice of yoga should lead or culminate in living in yoga. Yoga living, that is the goal. So all the steps of practice of yoga, there are steps of practice of yoga. Patanjali has given 8 steps of practice for yoga. So all these steps of practice of yoga are the means, and yogic living is the end or the goal. That is, we should be clear about this. So we have to reach that goal, or that means the goal is to live in yogic state. So when can we get stabilized or live in yogic state is only when the behavior of the mind stops. As long as the mind is continuing to behave, we cannot get stabilized in the yoga state. That is what Patanjali in the second aphorism says, yogaha chittavritti nirodhaha. So yoga is the process of stopping the behavior of the mind. So the 3 planes put together, as we have seen, they form the lower nature. This lower nature reacts towards the environment. And this reaction is in terms of impressions that are received by the mind. Mind is like as I told you, like a screen where the images of the persons and objects outside are projected on the screen. And these, all the images, they are received and they are stored, they are saved in terms, when we speak in terms of the computer language, they are stored in the memory. So there are so many impressions, every impression is received on the screen of the mind, and every impression is stored inside into the memory. And that is also one type of behavior of the mind, storing. So this reaction is in terms of others. So when we can stop this reaction, so how this reaction can be stopped? Through the practice of yoga. So what is to be stopped is not the mind, but the behavior of the mind. You should not block the mind, you should suspend the behavior of the mind. When this reaction is stopped, what happens is, when the reaction of this in terms of reaction, in terms of others, then the action begins. As long as there is a reaction, the action cannot begin. So the action begins in terms of our true existence. Action is in terms of our true existence, and reaction is in terms of our behavior. So these two are different. Reaction belongs to the mind. Action belongs to the inner consciousness. This is the differentiation. So practice of yoga and yogic living, all these put together is called the science of yoga. So the practice of yoga should be applied in every part of our life. What happens when we start practicing yoga? There will be a change in our attitude in our life. The attitude is changed to a right attitude, a proper attitude, a right attitude. That change will occur when we start practicing yoga. When we attain perfection in practice of the steps of yoga, then the entire life will be in the yogic state. Then we will be able to transact with the indweller, the I am in us. Our real existence is as the indweller, the I am. That is our innermost consciousness. And all other thing is around it. That is the activity of the lower nature. So the word yoga means the realization of oneness of all the paths of man. When we know the plurality, we can also know the oneness. If we know the 5 fingers, we can know them as the parts of one hand. All the 5 fingers belong to one hand only. So when we see the 5 fingers, it is plurality. When we can see them as the part of one hand, then we can reach the oneness. When we have 2 hands, then we can know that they are part of one man. If we go further, if we are two or more persons, then we have to know that all these many persons are part of the one person in all these bodies. It is in the beginning it is a little bit difficult to understand. We can understand if we speak of one person and his parts of the body. But when you speak of many persons as one person, who is that one person? I am the indweller. That is the real existence. That is what we call the one spirit. So, if we work with this consciousness, it is called the group work or soul work. For this, to attain this or to reach this, we have to constantly apply the practice of yoga. That is why Patanjali said, first we have to know how to get the behavior of the mind suspended. And then the question is, what happens if the behavior of the mind is suspended? Okay, behavior of the mind is to be suspended. Then only it is yoga. But what is that we attain, or what happens when the behavior of the mind is suspended? That is explained by Patanjali in the third aphorism. Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. That means then, tada means then. Drashta means the perceiver, the one who perceives. Swarupe avasthanam, that means he settles down in his own form. Then the perceiver settles down in his own form. When the behavior of the mind is suspended. Unless the behavior of the mind is suspended, we cannot settle down in our own form. So we have to settle down in our own form. For that, we need suspension of the behavior of our mind. We should be very clear, once again, that it is not the stoppage of mind, but stopping of the behavior of the mind. Because mind is an instrument. You cannot stop it or throw it away, because that instrument is very much needed for us. Only thing is, you should be able to know how to make use of the instrument. If you cannot know this, then there will be a wrong usage of the instrument. When we make possible to stop the behavior of the mind, then what happens? We can keep ourselves away from forming the impressions. That is the first achievement. We have to get rid of the impressions that are formed by the behavior of the mind. So as long as the behavior of the mind continues, we cannot get rid of the impressions, because continuously the process is going on, making the impression about the objects of senses by receiving the images. For example, when I see Mr. So-and-so, then my mind receives the image of the person. It is not the person directly. Person, how can the person enter into me? That person is outside me. But the image of the person is received through the senses, through the activity of the 5 senses. The image is received, and this image is projected on the mind. And due to this image, we start our reaction, our behavior towards the other person. So then, what about the other person? What is the actual state of the other person? The other person whom you call the other person is also same as like you. What are you to yourself? He is to himself. Similarly, you take an object. You have a wall before you. So you have an image of the wall received. And then your mind starts reacting towards the wall, towards this image. Just if you start questioning, the wall is outside, the wall is there only always. But what you call wall is the image of the wall which you have received. Take another example. You have banana before you. So, what you call banana is the image received by your mind. Its color is received through your sense of sight, so which you call banana. The smell which is received through your sense of smell is called banana. And also the taste which is received through your sense of taste, through tongue, that is what we call banana. So like this, your mind has received the impression, and that is what you call banana. But the real banana is different from this impression what you have received. So for itself what it is, just you make a question. For itself it is the same as what you are to yourself. So this is, in the beginning, appears difficult to understand, but it is not difficult. Gradually you have to practice. To realize this, to realize the real existence, to perceive the real existence, we have to get settled down in what there is in us. What is there in us? It is the pure consciousness. Every one of us, we have this pure consciousness as our real existence, which is within ourselves. So this pure consciousness, with its power of true perception. So this is what is called the higher nature of man. So the true nature and the truth put together, that is the higher nature of man. So this can be put into 2 parts. So intelligence and pure existence. We have above the mind, we have intelligence. and there is pure existence as the background. So, we have 5 planes of existence. So, one is the physical plane, and another is the vital plane, where is the activity of the senses, and the mental plane is the activity of mind, and the intelligence. So this intelligence forms the higher nature of man, our higher nature. And the 5th one is called Anandamaya, or the bliss. So thus bliss is our true existence, and is the reality, the truth. So the first 3 belong to our lower nature, our physical plane, vital plane and mental plane put together form the lower nature of man. The 4th one belongs to the higher nature, the intelligence belongs to the higher nature. The 5th one is ourselves, that is our true existence. That is why if I say that I have a body, it is correct. When I say I have my senses and sense organs, it is correct. Sense organs are on the physical plane, senses are on the vital plane. So, when I say I have a mind, it is also correct. When I say I have my intelligence, that is also correct. But if I say I have a soul, then it is not correct. That is not what I have, what I am. So there what I have to say, I am the soul, but not I have the soul. All other things are what I have, but soul is that which what I am. So this is our real existence. Our real existence is the soul. Soul is the real existence. So it is right, it is correct to say I am the soul, but not I have the soul. I am the soul. All other things are what I have. This only one thing is what I am. What I am is only one. What I have are innumerable, many. So the 5th one is what is called the Ananda, or the bliss, that is ourselves. The first 4 planes are the layers. The first 3 which belong to the lower nature, and the 4th one which belongs to the higher nature. Put together all the 4, they are our layers. And these layers are made up of the 5th one. And these layers exist as part of ourselves. All these 4, they exist as part of ourselves. The body, the senses, the mind and intelligence. They exist part of ourselves, made up of ourselves. So they exist in different states. The body exists in physical plane. The vital force exists in vital plane, where the senses are existing. Activity of the senses, that is on the vital plane. And the mind exists on the mental plane. And the intelligence exists on the plane of intelligence. Our consciousness is, so all these 4, they form the vehicles to serve our existence. They are the vehicles. We have our vehicle, all these four are like our vehicles. So our consciousness is the pointer of awakening in one of the above planes. So our consciousness is awakened. When we are in the yogic state, the consciousness is fully awakened in all the planes simultaneously. But before attaining the yogic state, the consciousness is awakened in one of the four planes. It is like the column of mercury in a thermometer. So the awakening starts from the physical plane and begins to ascend into other parts. So it starts from the physical plane and gradually the awakening extends or ascends into the next higher planes, from the physical plane into the vital plane, then into the mental plane, and then to the plane of intelligence. Like that it starts, the awakening increases. But how this process takes place, this process of awakening, how it takes place, that is, so this process takes place, this whole awakening, it takes place in the process of our evolution. So this evolution is the evolution of our inner consciousness, our soul. So the evolution takes place through many births. It needs many, many births because it is a gradual process. It depends upon how we keep track of our practice. So the practice of yoga minimizes the necessity of many births for this evolution. To reach the highest point of evolution, generally we need many births. Many means maybe thousands of births. But when we start practicing yoga, as is explained by Patanjali, then this process will be minimized. That means we need not take so many births. It is possible that this can be attained even in one birth itself. When the consciousness awakes in a higher plane, then it includes the awakening of the lower plane also. This is also we have to understand. Because the awakening starts from the lower plane and ascends into the higher plane. So when the consciousness starts awakening into a higher plane, then that doesn't mean that this awakening is closed in the lower plane. No. When we get awakened into higher plane, automatically it includes the awakening of the lower plane also. That means the lower planes are awakened better than before and arranged in a better manner and utilized in a better manner when the consciousness is awakened in the higher plane. We can experience this in our daily life. when gradually our consciousness gets awakened into higher plane, then our life is our life gets more better arranged than before. All our life activity is arranged in a better manner than before. That is what we can experience while this awakening takes place into higher plane of our consciousness. This awakening, when the consciousness is awakened into higher plane, then in the light of that awakened consciousness, the lower plane is also more illuminated than before. Master has given a wonderful example to understand this. Suppose there is a building with 5 stairs, like 5 planes of consciousness. When we enter the building, we are on the ground floor. From there is an arrangement that in every floor there is a light. So on the ground floor, we have switched on the light which can illuminate the ground floor. Then we have ascended into the next floor, the second one. There is another light in this floor, and when you have switched on this light can illuminate this floor and also the floor below. So this light in the higher floor can illuminate this floor and also the floor below. When you get into the next higher floor and switch on the light, then this light can illuminate this floor and all other 2 floors below. Like this, when you reach the 5th floor, there you put on the light, illuminate the light there. That light can illumine all the floors. In the same manner, when our consciousness ascends into the higher plane, gets awakened in the higher plane, then this lower plane is also included in that awakening, and better awakening. It is awakened much better than before. That means as you are advancing forward in your yogic living, when your practice of yoga is leading you into yogic way of living, then you can experience your mundane life more illuminated, with more efficiency in our work than before, and experiencing more ease of living than before. So all this we can experience when we get into the yogic living. So the lower planes are better awakened and arranged and utilized in the awakening of the higher plane. For example, When the plane of intelligence, when your consciousness is awakened into plane of intelligence, then the working of your mind will attain more perfection than before. That is how the lower plane is awakened much more better than before. Then what happens is there will be dawn of new concepts. And this dawn of new concepts which provide you a rearrangement of the existing concepts. It is just like when you have entered a school when you are a little boy. And when you are taught science or mathematics, whatever it may be, then when you get into the next class, higher class, then what you have learned before the lower class is much more illuminated, and you can understand much more of the same what we have learned before in the lower class at school. This is also our experience. So like this, when the behavior of mind is suspended, then only we can live in our real existence, our true existence. That is what is explained in the third aphorism. Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. That is what Patanjali says. When the behavior of mind is suspended, then the perceiver can exist in his real form of existence, which is our true existence. If the suspension does not take place, then what happens? That is explained in the fourth aphorism. If the activity of the mind, if the behavior of the mind is not suspended, then what happens? Vritti sarupyam itaratra. That means otherwise means if the suspension of the behavior of mind does not happen, then he undergoes identification with the behavior. Vritti sarupyam. Sarupyam means identification. We get ourselves identified with the behavior of the mind. If the behavior of the mind is not suspended, what happens? We get identified with the behavior of the mind. For example, I see some of you. So my mind makes an impression that he is my friend. So when it makes an impression, then I start to behave in terms of my impression made by mind. How I behave with that person is according to the impression made by mind, because the impression received by my mind and my reaction towards this impression. Then what happens? My mind made an impression that he is a good person, he is my friend, all this. All this is based on the image received by my mind only. But because all my behavior is based on this, then sometimes after if the image is changed, then what happens? My behavior also changes. So it is not stable at all. So when the behavior of the mind vritti is not suspended, then how I behave, it differs from one time to other time. It depends upon the image received at that time. So this is due to the reaction of my mind. That is why whom I call my friend today, it is possible after a few months or 1 year, I may call him my enemy. Why this change? It is because of the reaction of my mind basing on the impression that is received. What is the impression received? When I see that the other person is according to my expectation, all this activity is the activity of mind. Then I call him my friend. Then I behave in terms of my friend. When I see there is a change in the other person and he is not according to my expectation anymore, then what happens? The image is changed, so my behavior changes. Then I call him enemy. So this is what is happening in our mundane life. This is because we get identified with the behavior of our mind and working of our senses. So as long as we keep identified with all this, we cannot have our inner light or real existence expressed out. So that is what is being explained by Patanjali in the 4th aphorism. Otherwise, we get identified with the behavior. Vritti sarupya means get identified with the behavior. So that is the result. If suspension of behavior of mind does not happen, that is the result what we attain. Therefore, it is important, it is definite that we have to get the behavior of the mind suspended. Without this, we cannot enter into yogic living. As long as we get identified with any of these things, like identified with our body, identified with our senses, identified with our mind, and identified with all these what we receive, our mind receives and makes the impression from the image. We get identified with all these impressions, then we are not in yogic experience. So, we have to work out for the suspension of the behavior of the mind. So that is what is explained in the first two. First aphorism, of course, is about that that there is only practical instruction. That is in the first aphorism, Atha Yoga assessment, which we have discussed in the first lesson. So the second and third aphorisms Yoga chittavritti nirodha, suspension of the behavior of the chitta or mind is yoga. When the suspension happens, tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. Then the perceiver can exist in his own form. So now we got familiarized with the first, second and third aphorisms, and we will continue the study of the fourth aphorism with some more examples next week. So thank you all very much.